In the name of Christ, who teaches us how to love. Amen. Please be seated. One of the things that can be both fascinating but also sometimes a little bit maddening about Jesus is the way he can twist a question to give the answer that he wants to give. Or, like unto that, the way his answers to questions are sometimes so obtuse that even those first apostles were often left scratching their heads. If there's any one overarching personality trait about Jesus that transcends the various gospel accounts, it's that. The surprising ways that he answers and sometimes refuses to answer questions. It can be fun watching him thwart those who mean to oppose him. But for us, people who simply want to learn and grow and to follow Christ, his answers can sometimes feel a little bit frustrating. Sometimes we just need clear, concise answers. Sometimes we don't want to have to work quite so hard. But that's not usually Jesus' way. Usually, we have to work for it. Today, however, we hear one of those rare occasions when, even though the Pharisee tried to test him, Jesus answered plainly and directly. There could be no mistaking and no misunderstanding. Which commandment in the law is the greatest? Maybe it was meant to trip him up. Maybe they were thinking that if they put him on the spot, he might say something that they could use to incriminate him. Instead, he spoke about as directly as he ever did. He answered clearly and concisely. And one of those phrases that we should all have etched on our hearts and in our minds to guide us through whatever we do. Which commandment in the law is the greatest? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, he said. A second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. It couldn't be any clearer. This is what we're about. Despite all the ways that people have talked about the faith and written about it and done theology and fought and died and conquered, this is what it all comes down to. Or at least what it should all come down to. Unfortunately, oftentimes it doesn't. Too often we add limitations and questions and fears and anxieties. But the real crux of this faith is actually pretty simple. It's about being in relationship. It's about loving God and loving each other. Seems like Christianity should be the easiest thing in the world to master. Just two simple rules form the foundation of everything. But too often we do fall short. More and more among my friends on social media, I find people enthusiastically proclaiming their lack of faith. Throughout this country, the fastest growing religious group is the nuns. Not N-U-N, but N-O-N-E. Those people who claim no religious affiliation. Sometimes they describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, or sometimes they just say they're atheist or agnostic. My own online sphere bears out this trend. I see it over and over again. As reluctant as we are to talk about our faith among our friends, as unwilling as we are to be evangelists for our faith, the nuns are evangelizing. And their ranks are growing. Now, to be clear, I don't say this as a threat. This isn't about some anti-Christian boogeyman who's coming to get you in the night. But we would be foolish not to notice this trend and see it as the mirror of ourselves that it often is. Why is it that the people who are most effective at talking about their religion and recruiting people to join them are those who claim no religion at all? When I have occasions to really sit down with individuals and get to the bottom of it, their answer is almost always the same. It's some version of an indictment of the church's hypocrisy. The church says it's about love, but it feels like they only care about money. The church says it's about love, but they too often exclude people. The church says it's about love, but they hurt me. How might we appear differently to the world if we really did guide ourselves by this clear directive from Jesus? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and all the prophets. One of the most significant things Jesus says in this summary of the law is that little connector between the two commandments. He says, a second is like it. Not just that we're called to love God and to love each other as separate tasks. Jesus is saying that it's almost the same thing. They naturally go together. Part of how we love God is by loving each other. The best way to show your love for God is to love the people God has created and also loves. Encounter others' needs as if they were your own. Embrace others' successes as if they were your own. Embody God's love by loving God's creation. Sometimes the answers really are simple. Love God. Love each other. That's the basis of everything that we're called to do. When we stray from this, we stray from God. And it's no wonder that people notice. We can't be all things to all people. We're foolish to try. But we can be love to all people. We must be. That's our main job as people who follow Christ. On this hang all the law and the prophets. Amen.